Good evening. This is the candidate forum for the St. Croix and Pierce County District Attorney elections that will be held in November 2020. My name is Mike Brose. This forum is being sponsored by the St. Croix Valley Bar Association. Behind me, left to right, are Sean Freilich, Karl Anderson, Amber Hahn, and Halle Hatch. Mr. Freilich and Ms. Hatch are running for the Pierce County District Attorney's Office. They are, again, on the far left, Mr. Freilich, on the far right, Ms. Hatch. The two candidates in the middle are running for the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office, District Attorney position. And again, they are Karl Anderson and Amber Hahn, left to right. I'll be reading a brief introduction concerning each of the candidates in a minute. Following that, each of the candidates will be given an opportunity to introduce themselves briefly for about a minute. After those introductions, I will be asking questions to each of the candidates. And the format that will follow is that the opposing candidate to whom the question is asked will be given about a 2-minute opportunity to respond to the answer that is initially provided by the candidate to whom the question is asked. And then the initial answering candidate will be given a 1-minute reply opportunity. The question and answer period will last about 60 minutes. And at the end of that, members of the audience who are here will be given an opportunity to submit questions to answer or to pose to the candidates. And at the conclusion of that, each of the candidates will be given an opportunity to provide brief closing remarks. These are the written introductory comments submitted for my reading to the audience. Karl Anderson, St. Croix County candidate. Karl Anderson is originally from La Crosse, Wisconsin. He attended St. Cloud State University, graduating summa cum laude with a double major in criminal justice and Spanish. After working for 2 years, Karl received a scholarship to attend the University of Wisconsin Law School. Karl interned for the United States District Court Judge James D. Peterson, Dane County Circuit Court Judge David Flanagan, the Wisconsin Department of Justice, the Wisconsin Innocence Project, and the La Crosse County District Attorney's Office. Karl completed the UW Law School Criminal Law concentration with honors, and immediately after graduating began working as an assistant district attorney in St. Croix County. Amber Hahn grew up in Northwest Wisconsin, graduating from Chippewa Falls Senior High School in 2001. She went on to earn her bachelor's degree from Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, and her law degree from the University of Wisconsin Law School. Amber started her prosecution career in January 2009 at the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office, where she worked for 6.5 years before joining the Wisconsin Attorney General's Office in 2015. Amber is currently serving as an assistant district attorney in Dunn County. Sean Freilich, on our left, is 40 years old and lives with his wife in River Falls. He resides in Pierce County and has for the last 17 years. Sean graduated from UW River Falls in 2002 with a major in political science and minor in criminal justice. Sean served as a police officer for over 3 years in total for River Falls, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, and the Village of Ellsworth. He earned his law degree in 2010 from William Mitchell College of Law. Sean is the current Pierce County District Attorney and has served as the District Attorney for the last 7.5 years. Halle Hatch, on the right, is a native of Pierce County, growing up in Ellsworth and graduating from UW River Falls. She graduated from Mitchell William Hamlin of Law, magna cum laude. Halle interned at the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office while in law school, where she was a certified student attorney, which allowed her to conduct trials and court proceedings on her own and get immersed in the district attorney's office. She then became an attorney in New Richmond, practicing criminal defense, family law, and civil litigation. Halle is a member of the Pierce County Criminal Justice Collaborating Council and of the Communications Committee with the Wisconsin State Bar. She is currently a special prosecutor for Bayfield County, Wisconsin. Next, I'm going to ask each of the candidates to give a brief introduction of themselves. Karl Anderson.
Good evening. First of all, thank you to the St. Croix Valley Bar Association for hosting this. Thank you to the St. Croix Republican Party for allowing us to use their venue in downtown Hudson. I live in Holton, Wisconsin, and I've been at the DA's office for over 4 years. Apart from my duties as a prosecutor, my normal caseload, I'm active in the office on trying to do what I can to improve the criminal justice system in St. Croix County. I'm right now spearheading the creation of an elder abuse task force. I'm the head of the Veterans Diversion Program in St. Croix County. I've been appointed by the St. Croix County Board onto the Traffic Safety Committee. For the last year, I've been the DA representative at the Association of Towns meetings, updating the leaders of all our county's town boards on what's happening with criminal justice in St. Croix County. I'm honored to be here, honored to be running, and unlike the Pierce County election, there's no incumbent in our race. Mike Nieskus, the current DA, is retiring. I'm honored to have his endorsement as well as the endorsement of former District Attorney Rick Johnson.
Thank you. Amber Hahn.
Good evening. Thanks everybody who took that time to watch this forum. As was stated, I'm Amber Hahn. I just recently moved back to River Falls. I lived in River Falls about 5 years ago, and we're back living there now, my husband and my 2 children. I've been a prosecutor for over 11 years. During that time period, I have prosecuted over 50 jury trials. That's included homicide with not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect pleas, self-defense issues, overdose death homicides. I've prosecuted drug manufacture cases, drug delivery cases, possession cases, sexual assaults with both adult and child victims. And I've also prosecuted domestic violence cases and OWI and traffic cases. So I have practiced on a wide variety of different cases. I have tried cases in over 16 counties in Wisconsin and work with law enforcement in those counties as well. I have provided training to law enforcement and prosecutors across the state on topics anywhere from attorney ethics to probabilistic genotyping in DNA analysis. So I'm really excited to be back in St. Croix County and to bring all the experience that I've gathered in my career back here, and I'm excited for this opportunity to serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to the Pierce County candidates to introduce themselves. And we'll start on my left with Sean Freilich.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and spending this evening with us. Again, thank you to the bar, and thank you to the Republican Party for hosting this event and letting us use their venue. So my name is Sean Freilich. I'm one of 5 children. My parents, my mother, she's retired. She worked in military installation, taking care of infants. And my father, he's a retired editor and photographer of a newspaper. And I'm from Tomah, Wisconsin, but for the last 17 years, Pierce County has been my home. As the current district attorney, I have been doing this work for 7.5 years. I carry a full caseload, which means I have over 300 active cases, and I've been doing that consistently for the last 7.5 years. I have litigated approximately 40 cases to jury. I have prosecuted some of the most complex and challenging cases. Those jury trials, just to name a few, have included vehicular homicide, child and adult sexual assault, drug delivery cases, animal maltreatment, child physical abuse, and the list goes on. As a full-time prosecutor, I'm also a full-time administrator. I have a staff of 6 staff. I mentor them, and I also have 2 full-time assistant district attorneys. I also provide education and training to law enforcement on an annual basis and as needed. I'm approachable and I'm available whenever they need. I am on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When they call me at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're on scene, I pick up their call and give an answer to their question. So again, we'll get to talk a little bit more, but thank you for having us.
On my right, Pierce County candidate Halle Hatch.
Hello, everyone, and I wanted to thank everyone again who organized this and who attended. It's great to be here. As Mike said at the beginning, I grew up in Pierce County. I went to college in Pierce County, and my husband and I moved back after law school in the cities to come back to Pierce County again. I have a vested interest in the safety and the community of Pierce County, knowing a lot of people and growing up there. The current system is not working currently right now, and it needs to be improved. And that's what I hope to bring to this office: fresh eyes and fresh ideas to be able to bring Pierce County into the 21st century. I have been immersed in the Pierce County Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, and I have seen the progress that they have made to streamline the criminal justice system, and I hope to expand on that while in office and to improve the community through programs which are not currently implemented or utilized, because I think that that is just what Pierce County needs to move forward. Thank you.
We'll begin with the questioning now. I'm going to start with the St. Croix County candidates. There will be 2 questions. Each of you will be given the primary responsibility to answer one of the 2 questions, and then a response period by each of you and the opportunity, if you elect, for a reply. I have a timer in front of me. It's set for 2 minutes for the initial answer and response. I think it's set up such that we'll all be able to hear it, but it probably won't be captured by the microphones. I don't know. A little latitude will be given to complete an answer if you're in the middle of a thought when that alarm sounds. Otherwise, I'll turn off your microphone. So, we will start with Ms. Hahn. Ms. Hahn, as I understand it, Wisconsin spends a tremendous share of its budget on corrections at both the state and county level. In developing policies for charging and plea bargaining, would you consider the impact of those those charges have on both your counties and the state's corrections budget?
So in charging cases, I think there's a number of factors that impact that. One of them has to be, of course, whether there's probable cause to believe a crime has been committed. But while I think that the budget may impact charging decisions to some degree, I think that other factors are probably going to outweigh that budget consideration. But I think in considering the budget, a more important place to consider it, maybe aside from charging, is to look at resources such as the Day Report Center that St. Croix County has, and the ways that even though we can charge cases without undue weight given to the budget situation, we can still look for places to save money in the budget and in corrections in other places, such as the Day Report Center and other such efforts. So I don't think the budget would impact my charging decisions so much as I would look for other solutions in the corrections area for budget savings.
Likewise, with respect to plea bargaining decisions?
I think plea bargaining decisions should not be based on the budget, and they should be focused on protecting the rights of community members, protecting the safety of the community, and also protecting the rights of victims.
Mr. Anderson, do you choose to have a response period?
Yes, I agree. On a case-by-case basis, the budget shouldn't really come into the equation. What the question should be is what's best for the community? How do we protect the community? What do we need to do to rehabilitate the offender? I don't think on any case we should say, you know what, this is going to be expensive, so even though the best option is A, we're going to do B because it's cheaper. But as a policy, you can do things to address things like over-incarceration. One of the great things we have in St. Croix County, it's one of the gold standards in the state, is our diversion program, which under Mike was started by Eric Johnson, the former DA, has been expanded to a veterans diversion program, which I'm now heading under Mike Nieskis. And that's something that lowers the burden on courts, lowers incarceration, and gives these people the opportunity, while still having accountability, to earn a dismissal of their charges by seeking the treatment they need. It's those kind of programs that you can do as a policy level to try to limit that budget, but on a case-by-case basis, I think what you need to do is protect the community, and that's the goal.
Ms. Hahn, do you choose to have a reply?
No.
Thank you. Next question would be to Mr. Anderson. What do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders?
Well, what I was just talking about, the diversion program, we have two versions, a deferred prosecution where they don't enter pleas, and if it's a little more serious, they can do the diversion where they have to plead guilty to the charge, but that conviction isn't entered. And they'll be supervised by the diversion program in our office, and they have to go to treatment, maintain sobriety, stay crime-free. So with these low-level offenders, we don't want to fill up our jails or prisons with them. We want to rehabilitate them, make them productive members of society. So I think what we're doing now is great, and it works, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Ms. Hahn?
I agree completely. I think that low-level drug offenders don't belong in jail. They don't belong on probation. They belong in programs like diversion that can provide the resources to try to head off that addiction at an early stage. Hopefully with those low-level offenders, we're catching it early on, and it's more important to focus on rehabilitation to provide overall more safety for the public and the community.
Mr. Anderson?
I agree. I don't have anything to add.
The next two questions will go to the Pierce County candidates. First to Ms. Hatch. Ms. Hatch, what would your office policies be regarding plea bargaining in drug offense cases?
It would probably depend on what type of drug offense cases we're looking at. I do believe that a diversion program, like St. Croix County said, would be a great option, especially for those non-violent offenders. For the plea bargaining aspect of it, I think that a treatment program would be a good option for some offenders. But again, it would be based on a case-by-case basis, but treatment would definitely be a good option.
Mr. Freilich?
So to expand on that a little bit more, so the Office of the Pierce County District Attorney has had in place for several years a diversion program. So the diversion program does offer those nonviolent first-time offenders exactly that, diversion. So those individuals who are low risk, who don't meet the high risk category, are offered treatment in lieu of a criminal conviction. One example might be paraphernalia. So complete treatment and the charge is never issued. Another example might be a methamphetamine case where it's simple possession of methamphetamine. No criminal history, first time offense. We offer what's called a deferred judgment of conviction agreement, which is essentially a contract. Remain law-abiding, have your assessment, follow through with recommendations, continue on with the road to sobriety, and the case is dismissed. It's a win-win. So the case is not prosecuted, it's dismissed, and the person continues on with sobriety and is in recovery, and they get their treatment, they become a productive member of society.
Ms. Hatch?
The only thing that I'll add is that after speaking to community members and other people in the county, I do know that the diversion program in Pierce County, could be utilized at a greater frequency, and I would hope to do that if elected.
Mr. Freilich, next question is to you. What
Can
would
I
you-
respond to that?
No, not under the setup we have, I think, because she had the initial answer. So now we have a new original question to you, Mr. Freilich.
Certainly.
What would your policy be regarding charging children in adult court? When would you use your authority to file charges in adult court, and when would you pursue a case in juvenile court as a general policy?
Sure. So using that type of authority is reserved especially for the most serious offenses, homicide, sexual assault. So it is case-by-case basis. It's done in conjunction with victim rights, a lot of consultation, and it's very fact-specific, and like I said, it's very case-specific. So it's reserved for the most egregious cases and the most serious cases.
Ms. Hatch?
Yes, I agree completely with that. And one of the thought processes that I like to go by is called the 21 Principles to the 21st Century Prosecutor. And one of those principles is, charge kids and treat kids like kids. So I agree with Mr. Freilich's rendition of that.
Thank you. Anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is that this doesn't boil down to 21 principles of a prosecutor. You have to use your professional judgment. You have to rely upon evidence-based decisions. You have to look at some other factors. If it's a general recidivism type of case, sometimes you rely upon a compass, which is a validated tool. There's other factors that play into it.
Back to St. Croix County. Mr. Anderson, what programs and policies would you implement as district attorney to reduce crime and increase public safety in the county?
Well, a lot of what I want to do, I'm doing right now, thankfully, because I have such a supportive boss in the current district attorney. He's letting me start some of my initiatives now as an ADA. For example, I mentioned before the Elder Abuse Task Force. Elder abuse cases are complicated. You often have victims that might have dementia or be on their deathbed, so things have to move quickly. You have to do unique things like making sure you always interview, law enforcement always interviews the victim and records it. We might do things like depositions. There's unique statutes that apply. We're planning right now tentatively towards the second half of September, a seminar to spread awareness on elder abuse and try to get more community buy-in, get resources and contacts out there to the public, people who work with elders. So things like that, a district attorney should not just be prosecuting cases. They should always be thinking about what can you do to improve the county, make it safer for people. And I think that Elder Abuse Task Force is a perfect example.
Ms. Hahn, what programs and policies would you implement as DA to reduce crime and increase public safety in the county?
Sure. A lot of what programs I'd like to see continued would be continue and expand existing programs. For example, St. Croix County currently has a drug treatment court. It has a domestic violence court that's a little bit in its infancy. And I think there's a lot of research that shows that those treatment programs and those treatment court programs can be very beneficial to public safety. And I think that continuing and expanding and looking for opportunities to expand those programs would be important. Additionally, in the last few years, the Sheriff's Department in St. Croix County has cooperated with other police departments, River Falls Police Department and some of the other county departments to expand their ICAC or Internet Crimes Against Children programs. And I would like to see that expanded. We need to protect the children in our communities. And the internet is a huge area for people to be taken advantage of. And I think that we need to expand in those areas, be looking out for how we can protect people who are using the internet, not only children, but also elders. I think the initiatives that Karl spoke about with elder abuse are excellent. I definitely support expanding in that area as well. And I think that as we look at elder abuse, we also have to consider the financial abuse that is occurring on the internet. And so I think that those two can go hand in hand. And I think working on training opportunities, resources, and expanding in that area to protect the citizens from computer crimes, I think is going to be an important area to expand.
Mr. Anderson?
Another thing that we can do better is using the resources we have. Recently, I invited the Department of Health and Human Services to the DA's office to present on what kind of mental health services we have in the county already that are available. And judges have commented that it seems like we're getting a lot of these cases now where competency is an issue. People have severe mental illnesses, and by doing things by inviting these other departments to the DA's office, we can work together better to better serve the community, try to get people treatment, mental health treatment or drug treatment sooner. And so I want to do a lot of that also if I'm elected.
Thank you. The next two questions are to the next question is to Ms. Hahn. What are your goals as district attorney? And I'd like to hear you try to distinguish yourself from your opponent. What are your goals as district attorney?
Absolutely. So one of the first goals, well, first of all, I view the role of district attorney in sort of three parts. Management or administration of the office, the litigator or prosecution part, and then lastly, what I think is least important is politician. And I'll kind of explain my goals in each of those categories. As an administrator or manager of the office, my goals are to run the office efficiently, while also making sure that all the employees have development opportunities, training opportunities, and opportunities to better themselves and be able to have the freedom to dream up initiatives that are going to help the community and be able to support that in the employees. As a prosecutor and a litigator, I think it's my responsibility to mentor attorneys in the office who may have less experience, to get them trial experience, and also to work on making a solid team of litigators so that we can handle any case that comes across the office. And lastly, as a politician, I look at it less as a party politic issue and more as a relationship building piece. So my goal as if I'm elected district attorney would be to maintain strong relationships with our community law enforcement, our community members as far as community groups, and county associations and county board members to make sure that we're all working cooperatively to serve the community in the best way.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. I don't know if I could get it all out there in 2 minutes, but because I've been on the ground, so to speak, in St. Croix County for the last 4 years, I have a lot of goals that I want to accomplish when I'm elected for things that I see from my position that we could do. And the Elder Abuse Task Force is one. Another one is a lot of counties in the state are getting therapy dogs. When you have a child sexual assault case, you have a victim has to come and testify about this traumatic experience. Other counties have had great success with having a therapy dog that can sit up there with the witness on the stand. They're provided by nonprofit companies. That's another one I want to do. I want to be able to transition to paperless discovery that costs our office. I think we just looked today, $8,500 a year on postage. So if we do paperless discovery, it's easier for our staff, it's more efficient. That's another goal I'd like to achieve. You couldn't always do it because you have to mail out DVDs. But there's a lot more on my website. They're very specific goals. They're things I'm passionate about. I'm going to do them if I'm elected, and people can hold me accountable if they don't see them happen.
Ms. Hahn?
No response.
Back to the Pierce County candidates. Mr. Freilich, what are the most significant crime issues in Pierce County as you see it presently?
To date, the most significant crime issues that I see is far and away the methamphetamine problem. The methamphetamine use has really dovetailed into other issues. Certainly this is a chemical dependency issue, but it certainly has a domino effect into other areas. It can affect burglaries, it can affect major thefts, it also can affect our child protection cases, our temporary physical custody requests. Those continue to rise year after year. And if those cases get more significant and they follow suit into what's called termination or parental rights cases, it can mean that parent losing their child in terms of their parental rights. So far and away, methamphetamine is the biggest case, the biggest crime that we are facing in Pierce County.
Ms. Hatch?
I agree with Mr. Freilich. Growing up in Pierce County, I do know that meth is a big problem in Pierce County, especially with residents and other drug users in the community. However, after speaking to the community and getting out and talking to people during my campaign, I realized that another issue is domestic violence. And I have contacted Turning Point, and they have expressed to me how they would like to get some of the programs that they have just started within the past couple years with St. Croix County into Pierce County. And they haven't been able to do that. So that's one of the things that I would really like to spearhead in Pierce County, is to get the Turning Point implemented with domestic violence victims, and to connect them with resources and to implement the lethality assessment program with law enforcement, because I do believe that domestic violence, especially with COVID right now, there are a lot of victims who are in the homes of their abusers, and I hope to expand upon that if elected.
Turning point inability to get started in Pierce County is a function of what? Lack of resources? Is a lack of what?
Yes, I spoke to them last week, and they said that they have tried multiple times to get Pierce County on board and to work with them and to collaborate with them to be able to connect with victims, to be able to implement the lethality assessment program with law enforcement, and there's just been no bite. There's been no advocating for Turning Point to be associated with the district attorney's office or law enforcement, and that's something that I would try to do and advocate for.
Mr. Freilich, any thoughts?
This is quite interesting because this homicide prevention program is actually on my website, and it has been on my website for quite some time. So I actually sent out a questionnaire to law enforcement. I think it was back in May of 2019 when they meet with victims of domestic violence to ask victims of domestic violence these very critical questions, these questions that are red flag questions to determine victims who are at the greatest risk of homicide in Pierce County. Part of this homicide prevention program, which I learned through the Department of Justice, is a two-part program. The first is the questionnaire. The second part of this program is to provide an advocate, connection to an advocate right on scene, so the victim of domestic violence can talk to someone who's a subject matter expert and get that immediate connection so they can talk about their trauma, access to resources, and put this all together so those individuals can be identified and given the best help possible. So it's somewhat interesting too, because I have an excellent victim witness coordinator who's been in her job for over 25 years, not necessarily at Pierce County, and she has a solid relationship with Turning Point.
Thank you. Ms. Hatch, question to you. What are the greatest challenges of being the district attorney as you see it?
There are lots of challenges being a district attorney, but I think one of the biggest ones is the workload that district attorneys are faced with. And that, along with the retention of staff. There is a lot of turnover with ADAs, and I think that those two, along with budgeting and funding, are probably the three biggest challenges of a district attorney. But focusing on the workload aspect of it, implementing and actually utilizing programs such as the diversion program or a pretrial conference right after initial appearances with a district attorney can hopefully get those cases moved forward and towards a resolution right at the very start. Implementing those policies and actually utilizing them will not only save the county money without having to drag it through the entire court system and through trial, but it will also typically result in a better outcome for the defendant as well.
Mr. Freilich?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What are the greatest challenges of being district attorney?
So one of the greatest challenges certainly can be the workload. That's why I'm a working district attorney. I have a caseload of over 300 cases, and I'm a full-time administrator on top of that. So, but that's the job. It's a labor of love. I love criminal law, and I love my job, and I love doing the work that a DA does. That's why I'm in it, and that's why I'm running again. So, one of the suggestions to do a pretrial conference after initial appearance is simply not feasible. And it's not feasible for this reason. That's not how discovery works, and it shows Ms. Hatch's inexperience in the criminal justice process. Our legal secretaries have so many cases to file and to provide discovery that they cannot possibly kick out discovery in that short period of time. The county board allocates so many personnel to the DA's office, as they do for any department. The financial resources are just not there. They're just not going to provide it. I worked really hard, and I got our legal secretaries up to full-time status. So it's just not feasible in that manner. And yes, in a 2018 workload analysis conducted by the Department of Administration, and that's the last most recent one, we should have one more full-time ADA. And I fought for years to get the ADA that was part-time to full-time. That took me several years to do. I fight for my people to get them to full-time status so we can be the full-time staff that we are.
Ms. Hatch, a reply?
Yes, while practicing in Richmond and in Western Wisconsin, I've been able to go to several counties as a criminal defense attorney. I've been to Dunn County, Eau Claire County, Polk County, and I have seen that the pretrial conference with the district attorney after the initial appearance is very effective. And I know that perhaps it's not feasible as of right now with the current district attorney's office. That doesn't mean that couldn't become feasible or something could not be worked out with a set of fresh eyes. So that I do believe it's effective, and I know that it is thought highly of within other attorneys in the area.
Thank you. We're going to roll back to the top of the questions. We're going to stay with Pierce County for the first two questions and then go through them, and we'll end with St. Croix County. So to you, Mr. Freilich. You may remember, of course, I'll repeat it, Wisconsin spends a tremendous share of its budget on corrections at both the state and county level. In developing policies for charging and plea bargaining on a general basis, would you consider the impact of those choices have on both your counties and the state's corrections budget?
No. Here's why. When you look at a case, you look at the seriousness of a case, and someone comes up to you and says, it's going to cost $40,000 to incarcerate this person. Are you going to tell a victim, look, this person sexually assaulted you, this person killed your brother, it's going to cost $40,000, but we're not going to incarcerate them? Absolutely not. You look at, first, the galleon factors. There's three main overarching considerations: protection of the public, the gravity of the offense, and the character of the accused. Then, in addition to those factors, there's 12 Jones factors that all play into the consideration. Money is not part of any of that equation. And anyone that uses money to try and justify justice in the role as the prosecutor simply is not in the right role.
I can understand why the question might be frustrating to a prosecutor in an individual case. But as a matter of developing policy, are there things that you would contemplate doing to be more considerate of the budget constraint created by the incarceration levels in the state of Wisconsin?
So you certainly look at cases such as low possession cases such as marijuana. None of those individuals should be confined. Don't know how we got there, but none of those individuals should ever be locked up in a jail cell or in prison. Those cases are perfect for diversion. You look at those cases involving chemical dependency where they're not, and I say not, a predatory dealer. Those individuals should not be locked up. You look at any individual with a mental illness, those individuals do not belong in our jails or our prisons. So yes, when you look at it that way, diversion is an appropriate tool to help those individuals receive treatment and assistance without putting a strain on overburdened resources.
Ms. Hatch, following up on that, you feel free to respond to the initial response, but just following up on that, does Pierce County use its diversion programs that are available to them enough?
From my conversations with community members and other heads of the community and the county, no. That from what I've heard, they do not use it enough, and it could be used more, especially with those low-level offenders and with UWRF in the county.
What diversion programs does Pierce County presently have, as you understand it?
As my opponent said earlier, they have a diversion program that either has pre-charging or post-charging diversions for low-level offenders and for nonviolent offenders. They would enter some type of program that is worked out with the diversion office, and once they complete that program, they would either dismiss it or whatever the post-charge diversion program would allow.
Mr. Freilich, a response?
So again, Ms. Hatch is probably not talking to the right people, because the sole authority to determine whether someone is appropriate for diversion is the prosecutor. Unless she's talked to me, unless she's talked to my ADAs, they have the professional judgment, and they rely on a compass assessment. They rely on criminal history. They rely on other factors to determine whether someone is even appropriate for diversion. So community members, their personal opinion, anecdotal opinions or research that's anecdotal, that's not based on science, that's not based on professional judgment, that doesn't factor into whether they feel like diversion is used enough. An individual who feels like they should have got diversion but didn't, that is not supported by evidence.
Ms. Hatch, next question to you. What do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders?
I believe that diversion programs are the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders. And this is for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is that with those low-level offenders, if they can get in some type of treatment program, we can hopefully nip it in the bud to be able to prevent them from committing other crimes with drug abuse in the future. And these types of treatment programs are found to be effective, and I would hope to expand upon that and improve that in Pierce County.
Mr. Freilich? Is there room to expand upon that in Pierce County?
I apologize. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, Ms. Hatch, at the conclusion of her remarks just now, said she would try to expand upon the use of that diversion program in Pierce County, and I'm asking whether there's room to expand, or you think you're using it to the extent that it's available now.
There's always room to expand diversion. I can tell you that we have expanded it to now the Intoxicated Driver Improvement Program. We've had that existence for a few years now. So all misdemeanor level OWI offenses, if they accept the requirements of that program, they are on a sobriety, which means they receive alcohol testing, they agree to treatment, and they successfully complete, they will not serve time in jail other than the 48 hours, which is a statutory requirement. We can't get away from that. The balance of any jail that they could have served will all be on electronic home monitoring. So yes, there's always room for expansion. There's always new programs coming out. So yes, of course, anything that we can do to help people who meet that criteria, who are typically first-time offenders, low-risk offenders, who have no criminal history, nonviolent offenders, absolutely.
Ms. Hatch, any other thoughts?
No, thank you.
Back to St. Croix County for the next two questions. Ms. Hahn, what would your office policies be regarding plea bargaining in drug offense cases?
Sure. Well, I think in plea bargaining across the board, no matter what type of case, it's important to be fair, it's important to be consistent, and it's important to look at case-by-case situations. So when I say consistent, I don't mean that you have to do the same in every case, because not every offender is the same. And like was mentioned earlier by Mr. Freilich, we do as lawyers look to the galleon factors. You should consider the character of the offender. Evidence-based sentencing is a big area in the last few years, which basically says that you want to consider rehabilitative needs, which is always considered in sentencing, but you want to look at evaluations or tools or data that can provide you valuable information about the defendant to determine what's going to be the most appropriate bargain. But I think that when we say plea bargaining, we also need to keep in mind that public protection needs to be uppermost in a district attorney's policymaking, in my opinion. And so when you're looking at plea bargaining, you need to make sure that you're always considering public protection. And furthermore, you should always consider the rights of victims, especially in light of Marcy's Law, which recently passed, which has expanded the rights for a victim to be heard. And it's also expanded victim privacy rights. And so I think public protection definitely needs to be a factor as well when making plea bargaining policies.
Since you brought it up, you better explain what Marcy's Law is.
Sure. So Marcy's Law was recently implemented, and it adds a section to the Wisconsin Constitution which refers to the rights of victims. A lot of the legislation is similar to what we already had in statutes, but there was some expansion that occurred mainly in the area of victim privacy and a victim's right to be heard and be present at particular hearings. So.
Mr. Anderson, a response to the question or to the answer that Ms. Hahn just provided concerning the office's policies regarding plea bargaining, and I want to make it a little bit more specific as to you. What changes would you make from the current policies?
I've thought about this before, actually, and I was just talking about it with some people in the office. I think some policies can work for maybe the really common lower level charges that you get. For example, this is generally what we're going to do on first marijuana offenses where somebody doesn't have a prior. If they get another one, this is what we're going to do. So there's consistency, so it's not a dice roll on what prosecutor you get, what's going to happen to you. So on those lower level offenses, I think some policies can make sense. They're not going to be written in stone because every case is different. But on the bigger cases, there's going to be so many variables, a policy doesn't really help. You know, when you have a big level methamphetamine dealer, they could have two defendants with the same amount of drugs, but one could have a record 3 pages long and the other one could have no priors. So policy isn't really going to help you there very much because it's so fact specific when you get to those bigger cases.
And Ms. Hahn, any follow-up thoughts?
I apologize if we're too similar, but I just wanted to say, to agree and expand in that I think that what Karl's talking about there comes back to public protection. When you get into higher level felonies, violent felonies, or personal crimes, you know, sexual assault, child abuse, and high level drug dealing and those types of felonies, or homicide, those are the areas where you really have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. You can't have an across-the-board policy on those. And I think that, again, the uppermost factor there is what's best for the public and what are the rights of the victim.
So I'm going to mix in a few questions that have been written out by people who are here in the audience. And we'll stay with the formatting of the question. And I believe the next question goes to Mr. Anderson. And I think it kind of dovetails with the reference to Marcy's Law. But Mr. Anderson, what would you do to ensure domestic abuse victims receive justice?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but what we do some things already now that has changed in the last couple of years that helps a lot. Sean Freilich talked about that lethality assessment. We started that in St. Croix County, I think 3 years ago, and that's to ensure safety. But then once it gets to the criminal justice system, once a charging decision is made, that's where those victim rights come into play, where we confer with the victim. A big thing with domestics is, was this the worst night of your life and this is never going to happen again, it's never happened again, or is this somebody who is constantly abusing their partner? So a lot of what is justice on any particular case, we rely a lot on the victim's input. So a lot of times, even if a victim doesn't request to confer with me, I like to ask my victim witness, hey, can you reach out? Can you see if they'd be willing to talk to me? I would like to get a little bit more background, because one-page police report isn't necessarily, actually almost never will be reflective of the whole situation. And then it's just a matter of what are the facts, can we prove it? And ideally we get a conviction if we can prove it, and we get supervision, and sometimes the victims are happy, sometimes they're not, but domestic violence cases are tough because of that.
Ms. Hahn?
I agree that domestic violence cases are some of the toughest cases that prosecutors deal with. In my background, in my undergraduate career, and also shortly after law school, I actually worked as a domestic violence advocate and as an attorney advocate with people against domestic and sexual abuse in Jefferson County. So I'm very familiar with serving victims of domestic abuse. From a prosecution standpoint, I think what you need to do on these cases is a combination of being aggressive with your prosecution and a combination of being incredibly attuned to the victim's needs and the dynamics of domestic violence. You may not be able to talk directly with that victim. You should still try, absolutely, like Mr. Anderson said, but it may not be safe for that victim to interact with your office. So what you need to do is you need to evaluate that file as a litigator, as a prosecutor, and from a public safety standpoint, If that case needs to go to trial and you have the ability through the rules of evidence to present that case in a persuasive manner and get it through to a jury or to a judge, and if then that's in the best interest of the safety of that victim and the safety of the public, then that's what you need to do. Prosecution is not about win numbers, it's about justice. And so you have to be sensitive to that victim's needs and the dynamics of keeping them safe and what they have to do to keep them as an individual safe, and balance that with using every tool in your toolbox to litigate the cases that need to be brought.
As I understand the biographies that we went through at the outset of this, and I'm directing this question at the St. Croix County candidates, it doesn't seem, but you're a former member of the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office, Ms. Hahn.
Correct.
You're a present member of the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office, Mr. Anderson.
Correct.
And we have the near post district attorney sitting here with us this evening, and the past post district attorney sitting here with us this evening. A lot of experience in the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office is sitting in this room right now. I'm curious to know, and I'll direct it to you first, Ms. Hahn. What policies, if any, general policies, if any, at the District Attorney's Office in St. Croix County would you like to see different? And perhaps there aren't major structural changes. Perhaps you think it's a fine-tuned machine and has been ever since Rick Johnson left us. But what would you like to do different?
So there's always things that can be changed. Technology is always changing. I think that there's a bigger opportunity for support staff to participate in trial litigation. In the different offices that I've worked in, I've had the opportunity to see the benefits of what we can do with electronic presentations in trial and how much more effective we can be in reaching jurors. And so I would love to see some of the support staff pulled into the courtroom if possible. And I think that could be expanded upon further than it has been now. I'd like to see more innovative use of technology in the courtroom by all the attorneys. And in speaking of that, and I think a lot of this had to do with resources and caseload. And so some of this is going to have to be acquainting myself with whether this is possible. But since we have gotten a few more positions since I was last in the DA's office, I would like to see more two-person trials. I would like to see more mentorship going on. When I came into the DA's office, the attorneys in the office had years and years of experience. I worked with Frank Collins, Dennis Erickson, Eric Johnson, Kevin Gaylor, and they were people with long years of experience, but I didn't have a lot of opportunity to try cases with them. And it wasn't until I became an assistant attorney general that I really got to learn from people who had more experience than me. And I would like to see that expanded in the DA's office, to have the opportunity to collaborate more on trials. And I think that that's something that we can do more.
Mr. Anderson?
So there's not a single policy or a single thing we do right now that I think, as soon as I'm elected, if I'm elected, I'm going to end that. Mike Nieskis and Eric Johnson have both left big shoes to fill. Both of them left St. Croix County, the criminal justice system in St. Croix County, better off than when they started. So I just want to, of course, there's always room for improvement, and we're going to get a fresh set of eyes into the DA's office. I have very specific goals, like I mentioned before. So I have ideas to improve it, but there's nothing that when I've been here that I thought, the way we do this is terrible. Those two guys have done a great job. If there was something that stuck out to me, they both had open door policies. I could have came in and expressed my concern, and they would have listened. And I'm pledged I'm going to do the same thing with the staff in the office if I'm doing something that they have a concern about.
Thank you. I'm going to turn back now our attention to the Pierce County candidates. And I apologize, I've forgotten who got the last direct question. If you guys remember, let me know, and then I'll pivot. Otherwise, I was going to turn to Ms. Hatch. There's been a considerable amount of talk about victims and protecting their rights. It goes with the territory in a race for the district attorney's office. But I'm curious to know what procedures you would employ to protect citizens of the county against false allegations.
Absolutely. The false allegations, as a criminal defense attorney, I have, argued against that towards the district attorneys. However, to protect community members and citizens against those false allegations, I think what we really need to do would be to collaborate with law enforcement and make sure that we have all of our, T's crossed and our I's dotted to make sure that all of the false allegations or the allegations in general will be true and be able to be met by the elements of each factual case. Again, it would be on a case-by-case basis. However, I think that the victims or the people who are being alleged to have committed these crimes, that would just be a collaboration with law enforcement to make sure that the investigation is solid, and then go forward from there.
Thank you. Mr. Freilich?
So this is something law enforcement does every single day. They evaluate the credibility, the veracity of every person making a report. And not only does law enforcement do that, but the prosecutor does that when that report hits his or her desk. So you look at every available piece of evidence. You look at witness statements. You look at the observations of law enforcement, photographs, physical evidence, lab reports, body cam footage. The biggest thing I think that has been such an improvement in law enforcement is body cam. That body cam evidence is crucial. There is nothing more valuable in my mind. You talk about protecting citizens. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, video is worth 1,000,000 in my eyes. You want to protect citizens from false allegations of others. You look at a victim statement, you do interviews that are done not only just handwritten, but I ask officers to get those recorded, video. You get the emotion, you get the disposition of that witness, so you can fully evaluate that person, how they say it, the words that they use, and you can compare that along with their written statement and the physical observations of that officer.
Thank you. So I have a question from an audience member who I think would like to have a little bit more controversy introduced into our debate tonight. It is also to the Pierce County candidates, and it is directed at you, Ms. Hatch. What's wrong? Your point of view. I don't think the question, I'll just offer as an aside, I don't think the question is designed to be sensational. It's not. Okay, very direct. What's wrong with the current Pierce County District Attorney's office as you see it? And I don't know if they're looking for your thoughts about the way it's handled administratively. I don't know if they're looking for your thoughts about decisions about charging or sentencing or hiring practices. It's just unclear to me. But the questioner would like to know what your criticism is of the present district attorney's office in Pierce County.
Yes, I will try to explain that the best that I can within 2 minutes. One of the biggest criticisms that I have heard is the deteriorated relationship with law enforcement that the current district attorney has with all law enforcement. And that is something that I hope to rebuild. I have been in contact with a lot of law enforcement, and I think that we are on a great page, and the communication that needs to be brought back into the district attorney's office is something that I hope to bring to it. Speaking to Turning Point, they also said that they wish that they could have, someone in the office who would be able to be open to communication and open to new ideas, and to be able to bring new life back into Pierce County and bring in new programs, and to have people, especially community members, heads of the county, law enforcement, or other nonprofit organizations, not feel comfortable to go to the district attorney and pick up the phone and say, "Hey, let's chat about this." I think that's a real detriment to the county, and that's something that I would strive to improve, is to have an open door policy. Communicate with me, because I think that communication and collaboration is one of the most underrated aspects of an office. One other issue that I have heard about, researched about the district attorney's office as a backlog of felony cases. There is a 90% clearance rate for felony cases in Pierce County, so I would hope to ease the backlog of that, so that victims wouldn't have to wait as long to get justice and to not have the unnecessary burden on the community. And then just one last thing real quick with domestic violence, I hope to get more convictions for domestic violence. Turning Point, just one nonprofit in the area, they get some of their funding from the domestic violence surcharge that is with convictions. In a similarly situated county, Shawano County, they received $7,000 in 2018 from the surcharges. In Pierce County, they received $150 for those surcharges. So I would hope to get more convictions for domestic violence to be able to support Turning Point. However, I realize that not all family members can pay the surcharge, so sometimes that is waived. But with the similarly situated county, I think that needs to definitely be looked at a little bit closer.
So clearly I have to give Mr. Freilich an opportunity to reply, but I'd like you to clarify something for the audience. You used the term 90% clearance rate. What does the 90% clearance rate mean?
That basically 90% of the cases have gone through disposition, and that there are still 10% of the cases still outstanding.
Okay, Mr. Freilich, your thoughts about Ms. Hatch's comments?
Certainly. So the relationship with law enforcement, I guess I don't know what officers she's spoken with, but I have a lot of support from law enforcement officers, from leadership all the way down to line level officers. I have endorsements from an officer who just retired. He's a former investigator for the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. I worked with him on some of the most complex cases and some of the most difficult cases to unpack. I also have an endorsement also from a former captain of the River Falls Police Department. And what's somewhat interesting is, and I didn't come up with the name, there's something called the Hatch Act, which prohibits law enforcement officers who are currently employed who receive federal funding from endorsing a candidate. So that's why they're former officers. So I just want to make that point very clear. So the support I do have from officers who are current officers, obviously they can't be specifically named. So in terms of building a relationship with officers, they talk to me every single day. They come to me for advice. They call me, like I said, at 3 o'clock in the morning. They reach out to me. I send out an annual evaluation seeking feedback on what I can do to do my job better. I take that to heart. I incorporate that. So I provide training annually to every single agency in Pierce County. They don't always respond to it, but I offer that. I provide legal updates. Sometimes I do that over the email because they come in so frequently. So that's one issue. There's a lot to get here too. So the backlog of cases, that's not within my control. So I make speedy disposition requests for victims on behalf of victims. The court congestion, we have one judge in a county of 41,000 people. I have no control over that. I don't. I move my cases as quickly as I possibly can. I can tell you that sometimes defense attorneys file motions. That makes a case go longer. They request additional pretrials because they have to talk about the offers with their clients. It takes a lot longer for cases to reach disposition in Pierce County because of our limited judicial resources. That is very unfortunate. As far as the $150 surcharge, I don't really understand her math. That cannot be waived. It's statutory. Cannot be waived. So if it's being waived, that's a problem. So I forget all the other issues that were brought up. As far as domestic violence and as far as the relationship with Turning Point, if there's an issue there, it certainly will be addressed. But I know my victim witness coordinator, she is phenomenal. She does everything she can to coordinate those services, and I'll address that immediately if that's a concern. We've always had good working relationships with any partner that we've worked with.
Thank you. Ms. Hatch?
Just briefly, the math comes directly from Turning Point and the money that they receive from the surcharges. That is not my math at all. Also, I do recognize that the victim witness staff at Pierce County is great, so I am not knocking against them at all.
Thank you. The next question is to the St. Croix County candidates, and it's very specific, and I don't understand the reference, and so perhaps shouldn't be weighing in or wading in on this. It's to Ms. Hahn first, and then Mr. Anderson. Explain to us what your position is regarding the Day Report Center in St. Croix County.
Sure. So the Day Report Center is a part of the Sheriff's Department, and it imposes bail conditions, or it does daily drug testing for people who have particular bail conditions. And from the conversations that I've had with stakeholders in St. Croix County, and this is something that I think Mr. Nieskis actually saw implemented and saw through, is that it's had an overwhelmingly positive effect on the county. People on bail and utilizing the Day Report Center are maintaining sobriety at much higher rates than we saw prior to its implementation. And I think that it can be even expanded further to provide more assistance to our families where drug addiction and drug problems are taking children out of the household, and other human services, drains on human services can be actually helped and can collaborate if we can expand the use of the Day Report Center, because I think it has proven over the time it's been implemented to be successful in helping people maintain sobriety and keeping them on the right track to being in recovery and being rehabilitated.
Mr. Anderson, similar question. I'll just phrase it a little bit differently. Agree with Ms. Hahn concerning expansion of the Day Report Center?
I guess I don't know what that would look like. We pretty much, it's up to the judges now on when they order testing at the Day Report Center or not. We can ask for it or not, but ultimately it's up to the judge. And I think pretty universally on the cases where you're concerned about addiction, either alcohol or drugs, the Day Report Center does get ordered. So I don't know that there's room for expansion. But it's a great program because rather than defendants just being on bond and going about their way, maybe continuing to use because there's no testing, there's no accountability, and then they don't have to try to maintain sobriety until they get on probation or until they go to jail or prison if it is a serious case or if there is incarceration. Now, as soon as they're charged, we can try to get them sober so they already have that period of sobriety when they start on probation, and they have a much better chance of success, and the community is safer immediately once these people get on bond and we can ensure their sobriety.
Mr. Anderson, the next question. Do you find that St. Croix County is tough enough on child molestation criminals?
Yes. There obviously is a serious charge. We take it seriously. Fortunately, it's not something we have to deal with every day. But yeah, that's about as serious as it gets. Homicide and crimes against children is about as serious as it gets. We take them very serious. And I think if I didn't agree with that, I'd be doing something wrong. I'm in the office currently, and I have some of those cases.
Ms. Hahn, do you agree with him that the St. Croix County is presently tough enough on child molestation criminals?
Yes, I don't think that there's a problem with the level that they're being prosecuted. I do think that there's room to partner with law enforcement and to try to be an advocate for expanding the efforts that we have in bringing more cases to the district attorney's office. But I don't think that the district attorney's office is doing or failing to hold those offenders accountable when those cases are making it to the office.
I have one last generic question for each of the candidates, not necessarily related to becoming the district attorney. And I think the answers will absorb close to the balance of time we have remaining before the closing remarks. And so I'm going to pose this question. I'll start with Mr. Freilich, then Mr. Hatch, then Mr. Anderson, then Ms. Hahn, and then we'll go to our closing remarks. The question is this: what are your long-term personal goals professionally, Mr. Freilich?
Professionally, I love this work. I love criminal law, protecting the needs of the most vulnerable is so important to me. That's why I started off as a police officer. I wanted to help others, and I saw real joy that came out of that. When I saw someone being bullied or I saw someone hurt, it gave me a real sense of meaning to help that person. So when that experience really dovetailed into the law, I saw an opportunity to really marry those two concepts, law enforcement and the law, and being a prosecutor does that perfectly for me. Being district attorney, it's a labor of love for me. When I get to meet with victims and I get to fight for them in court, that brings real meaning and purpose to me. This is a lifelong career, and like I said, it's a labor of love, and the most satisfying thing is getting up in front of a jury and arguing my case, fighting for victims, and making our communities safe.
Ms. Hatch, your long-term personal goals?
Yes, professionally, my goal is to continue being a prosecutor. I discovered my passion while entering at the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office, and that is why I'm running now. I tried criminal defense, and as rewarding as it is just not where my passion lies. So I hope to continue with prosecution in the future, and in that, I hope to get new programming and more progressive ideas into Pierce County to have more programs for treatment for mental health, which as a part of the Pierce County CJCC, there is a new mental health grant with Dunn County, which Pierce County is partnering with it. And I hope to expand upon that as it's so important, especially today. And with reform across the nation, I hope to get more programming to reduce incarceration and still keep the conviction rates up.
Mr. Anderson, your long-term professional goals?
My long-term professional goal is to be a prosecutor in St. Croix County. I came here. I love it. I have no intentions of leaving. My LinkedIn still said I was a law student just until I started running for the campaign. I figured I better update that. My resume hasn't been updated. So I'd like to follow in Mike's and Rick's footsteps, be a prosecutor in St. Croix County, hopefully district attorney, and leave it a better place, better county, safer than when I came in.
Ms. Hahn?
At the age of 37, I rarely have the opportunity to say this, but I think as I sit here, I've had more experience as a prosecutor than all four of us here at this forum. And my long-term professional goals have changed over time. When I started out as a prosecutor in 2009, and in the 6.5 years that I served in St. Croix County, I had a passion for being the best litigator that I could be. I wanted to be the best prosecutor I could be. And that's the reason that I left the St. Croix District Attorney's Office and the St. Croix County community to go to the Wisconsin Attorney General's office, because that's where I saw the expansion of my skills and where my professional goals led me to be the best professional and the best prosecutor that I could be. And I had that experience. I've gotten to practice in 16 different counties. I've gotten to try some really interesting, complex cases. I served as a sexual assault kit initiative attorney, and I learned a whole lot about DNA and cold case sexual assault. And through all of those experiences, what I learned was where I started was where I wanted to be. And as rewarding as being an assistant attorney general was, and the casework that I got to do, I missed having that direct connection to the community and being able to directly serve my neighbors and my community. And my long-term professional goals is to be a career district attorney. I want to serve the St. Croix County community until I'm ready to retire, because I love this community. It's the best place I've ever lived, and it has some of the best law enforcement that I've ever worked with and some of the best court partners that I've ever worked with. So my long-term professional goal is to be district attorney in St. Croix County.
We're now going to return to the final remarks, and I believe that we began with our opening remarks in the order that the St. Croix County candidate and Pierce County candidate list was provided to me, and that it was Mr. Anderson, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Freilich, and Ms. Hatch. And so let's reverse the order for the purpose of the closing, and I'll turn to Ms. Hatch first and ask you please to share with us a couple minutes of your concluding remarks about why you want to be and why you ought to be the Pierce County District Attorney.
Absolutely. I want to be Pierce County District Attorney because I have a vested interest in the community safety of Pierce County. I grew up there, I have a married family there, and I hope to remain in the area. That's why I moved back from the cities instead of staying in the cities for those job opportunities. As for my experience, I know that I'm young, but going into this, I have more experience than my opponent did going into this 8 years ago. With this, I bring in fresh ideas, fresh motivation, and a hunger and a zest to make the community better, which I grew up in. And with my age, I have a better sense of the technology that can be brought to the courtroom to be able to provide more convictions and to introduce that and to save the county money with that. And I don't know everything about the district attorney position. I have not worked in Pierce County as a district attorney or an ADA. However, I am very adaptable and I'm a quick learner. And I think that once in the office, I would be able to pick up on those ideas, have a good line of communication with county officials and law enforcement to be able to get these initiatives up off the ground and to get Pierce County up into the 21st century. I think one of my strongest attributes is my ability to communicate with other people through law enforcement and other people that I've already communicated with. They're excited for this possible reform for Pierce County, and I'm excited for the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Freilich, your concluding remarks concerning why you want to continue to be the Pierce County District Attorney and why you ought to be the Pierce County District Attorney.
Pierce County deserves an experienced, dedicated prosecutor who is committed to public safety. For the last 7.5 years, that's what I've been doing. I carry a full caseload of over 300 cases. I have tried approximately 40 cases to a jury of some of the most complex and challenging cases, including child, adult sexual assault, physical abuse of a child, vehicular homicide, crimes involving drug delivery, animal abuse, and the list goes on. Strangulation, stalking. I run an office of 6 staff. I evaluate all of them. I mentor 2 full-time assistant district attorneys. I provide education and training, ongoing, every year for law enforcement, and then every legal update I provide for them. I have open and honest communication with officers. They come to me for advice every opportunity, and I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I get woken up in the middle of the night. I take those calls because I love my job. Now, I'm endorsed by the St. Croix County DA, Mike Nieskus. He's in this room. I'm endorsed by the Pepin County District Attorney, John Seifert. These are attorneys with years of experience. Talk to them about me and my performance and what I've done. I'm also endorsed by 2 former police officers. Talk to them. I'm endorsed by a former child protection supervisor of Pierce County. Talk to her. These people know my worth. I want to talk to you about my opponent and what she thinks. She said that she has more experience than I did back when I started. Yes, that's true. The landscape has changed. When I started, Bill Thorey was in our office. He was a prosecutor for 25 years, 40 years as an attorney. Guess what the experiences are in our office now if I was not in our office? We have an ADA who has less than 5 years of experience and another ADA who has 1 year of experience. Who is going to show Ms. Hatch how to do her job? Who is going to go to Ms. Hatch for every criminal law question? I submit to you that this is not going to work out the best. I submit to you I'm the more qualified, experienced prosecutor who is going to fight for victims' rights. I please ask for your vote on August 11th. Thank you.
We'll turn now to the St. Croix County candidates. Ms. Hahn.
So, as I've kind of already stated, I think that the reason that I should get your vote on August 11th is mainly because I have experience to be in this role. What I've learned through my career, and this is common adage or a cliche, if you will, is that you learn more from your mistakes than you do from when you are successful. And in 11 years, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've learned a lot of lessons. And I think that it's important that I bring those lessons to the office and to provide leadership in the office. I am a mother of two. My oldest daughter is 5. She's going to be starting kindergarten this year. And my husband and I just moved to the community of River Falls, and we're really excited to be back in St. Croix County, and we're really excited to be a part of the community. And I want to serve this community to the best of my ability, and in all of the experience and all of the professional lessons that I have learned, the best way that I can serve this community is in the role of district attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. I've kind of found that one of the most awkward part about politics is talking yourself up all the time. I much more appreciated when you read my bio. But so, like I said, I'm committed to this community. You want 2 things in a prosecutor. I've talked about this as a district attorney. You want somebody who's qualified to do the job, qualified to prosecute the cases that come through. I, of course, am. I'm doing it right now. You also want a prosecutor who is going to constantly be trying to improve how we're doing things. You don't have to take my word for it that I'm going to be doing those things, because I'm doing it right now. You can look at what I've done right now, what I'm going to be doing tomorrow, and what I've done over the last year after the last 2 to 4 years. So I wouldn't have the support of Mike Nieskus and Rick Johnson if they didn't think I was going to do a great job as the next district attorney. I'm committed, and I'm ready to keep fighting for justice for St. Croix County residents.
Thank you to each of the candidates for Pierce and St. Croix County for participating in this forum tonight. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.